Hey Netrunners, what's up? Holy moly, the world just flipped. It's as though I'm now gonna play a completely different game. The bombshell has dropped. A completely new FAQ and most wanted list have hit the have has hit us. It's real. It's happening. I'm not gonna do an analysis of it. I'm not gonna give too much of my opinion. I'm just here to give you a summary of all the changes made. This is mostly targeted at players who have been to a tournament within the past few months and know of all tournament rules prior to this and want to catch up to speed without reading all these lengthy documents or filtering through the entire of Reddit. So let's get started. I'll cover all the rules that will probably make a difference in tournament play. I won't cover trivial rules, so let's get going. First and foremost, what are the new deck building restrictions you must take into account when building your tournament legal deck? Firstly, there's new errata. AstroScript pilot program is now limit 1 per deck, just like Philotic Entanglement. So this means that there's no longer an Astro Train to be had. This is very important to note. And also, Museum of History should be unique. This is not a one-off, so you can still play 3 copies of Museum of History. You simply cannot have multiple copies rest at the same time. This errata is effective 18th of July, which is when the entire FAQ will be in effect. What's not in effect on this date, however, is the most wanted list, which will only come into play from next month onwards. Compared to the previous most wanted list, we have one removal, which is the AstroScript pilot program. It's not on this list, it's on the 1 per deck list instead. So with it being unique, it is no longer on the most wanted list. Everything else on the previous most wanted list stays. We have some new additions. On the runner side, we have a lot of cards belonging to the very dominant Dumble Fox. We have David, Faust, and Wildside. All will now dock 1 influence off your deck. Co-op side, you have Breaking News and Mumble Temple. So these are the changes with regards to deck building. The most wanted list is the only document that is effective from next month onwards. Everything else that I'm about to present will be effective from 18th of July. Next question. What changes are there to tournament structure and tournament rules? Firstly, there's a new section on loss and damage cards. The too long didn't read version is if you are caught with missing cards from your deck or damaged cards, you need to replace them as soon as possible. If you cannot replace them before your game begins, you are given a game loss for the side which you are missing cards from or have damaged cards from. If your cards are damaged during a tournament, the TO might allow you to proxy if you cannot find a suitable replacement. So it is good that there is a clause in the FAQ addressing cards that are unintentionally damaged. However, if your cards are lost or if you have missing cards, like for example if your opponent accidentally takes your cards after a game and you move on to your next game without realizing, you are going to get game lost if you suddenly realize there are too few agendas in your deck. So be sure, moral story, to check the number of cards in your deck before and after every single match. Moving on to tokens. Basically, your tokens cannot obscure card information. I'm not sure why this was added to the tournament FAQ. I would like to hear the motivation behind adding this because as far as I know, there's been no recent case where unorthodox tokens has caused confusion or problems. I've been using poker chips in games that I play, and then people seem to be generally fine with it. I could be wrong, but as far as I know, it is definitely much clearer than having a bunch of FFG credits stacked messily around your ID. Clarity of tokens, in my opinion, is more important than exactly what tokens you use, but apparently now there is this ruling here. I'm also not sure how this affects using dice because this specifically says tokens that are not official are fine, but they didn't say anything about dice, so I'm not sure. Next is going to time. There's no change except for the finals, which previously used to be untimed. They are now 60 minutes each. Scoring is also different. Instead of the usual 2 points you get for a game win, you now get 3 points for a game win and 2 points for a modified game win. So this change does not affect intentional draws. What this affects is that you now have an incentive to get a modified game win, which is basically going to time and then winning on having more agenda points. Why is this important? Previously, if you were going to time, your best strategy, if you're trying to win the tournament, is actually to draw with your opponent. Because whether you win on time or draw on time, you will still get 1 tournament point regardless in the previous system. However, giving your opponent 1 extra point by making it a draw instead of modified game win will improve your strength of schedule. So there is no incentive to get a modified game win if you can force a draw. And this is a problem because people can draw under the hood without other people knowing, just to improve their SOS to get themselves a better shot of winning. And this is collusion. To avoid this, now modified game wins are worth 2 points, so now you actually have an incentive to go for the modified game win instead of settling for a draw. And because it's now worth 2 points, you have to bump up the game win to 3 tournament points. This does not affect intentional draws because intentional draws are still worth 3 points to each player. So the maximum points you can get is 6 points per round. Whether you split both sides, which means that both sides win corp or both sides win runner, you will get, or if you intentionally draw, you will still get 3 tournament points for that round. So it does not affect IDs, but it affects people going to time. What are the changes in card rules? Let's see. Firstly, the Mumbai City Hall interaction is now busted. The rules have changed such that if you're searching for a card, for example with Mumbai City Hall, you must immediately shuffle R&D before resolving that card. This applies not only to Mumbai City Hall but also to other cards such as Hostage on Street Peddler. You might have remembered me talking about this in the previous video. It targets this interaction specifically. This is important because it is no longer relevant to look at the top few cards of your deck before deciding which card to resolve. So with Mumbai City Hall, for example, even if you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, it doesn't matter because you will not be drawing them with Heritage Committee. If you decide to play Heritage Committee, you pull the Heritage out of your deck, and then you shuffle your deck, which is part of the Mumbai City Hall's resolution, before proceeding to resolve the Heritage Committee. As such, you are drawing 3 fresh cards off the top, and you have to place 1 card on back onto R&D. If you place an agenda onto R&D, it won't be shuffled back into your deck, as it would be previously. So this is an important change that further nerfs the Prison IG decks and the Gagarin Hot Tub decks, alongside the influence hit on Mamba Temple and the uniqueness of Museum of History. Punitive damage has also been changed. Now it's a lot less confusing. It's a straight up deal damage equal to the number of printed agenda points. This only affects Global Food, which is now worth 3 meat damage instead of 2, and Merger, which is the converse, as well as the board. So the board no longer affects the number of meat damage done with punitive because it does not affect the printed number of agenda points. Targeted marketing no longer works on runner currents. You do not gain the 10 credits if you name a runner current, so do not name a runner current. Always be running no longer triggers on Sneak Door or Keyhole. This is quite important. If you're playing Adam, there's no point playing Sneak Door or Keyhole just to get past the always be running restriction. They do not fulfill the requirement anymore. Programs that make a run. That's very key. Next, information sifting is clarified. This ruling was made on the unofficial FAQ from Anchor, but if you haven't read it, basically the ruling is that a pile refers to a stack of 1 or more cards. Information sifting requires you to separate, or rather requires the corp to separate their HQ into 2 face down piles. If the corp is unable to do so, which means that if the corp has only 0 or 1 cards in their hand, they cannot possibly separate their hand into 2 piles because they cannot make 2 piles of at least 1 card each. As such, the entire information sifting fails to resolve. So there's no point playing info sifting against a co-op with one or fewer cards in the hand. Alright, so those are the major changes that concern potentially game-changing rulings. There are a lot more blue text rulings in the FAQ and the tournament rules, but I'll leave you to check them out yourself. Those are generally clarifications on existing well-known interactions, such as how how approaching ice works and what happens when ice is added or removed from a server during a run. These are rather intuitive and do not exhibit any change from what we know previously, hence I did not include them in this summary. Everything that is important or any notable changes all have been included here. If I missed out anything, be sure to point it out in the comment section. Otherwise, thanks for watching and have fun dealing with this big bomb.